I'm Skye. I feel like my story is just spiritually woven with Bitcoin because of how I was raised and my experiences leading up to college and then studying economics. My parents were savers, classic savers. The problem with that is that they didn't realize that in the system we lived in, saving wasn't rewarded to the extent that it should be. 2008 happens and it's an unmitigated disaster and so many people are losing everything. I knew there were shenanigans going on. I was in high school in 2009 when I first heard about Bitcoin. Some dude used it to buy pizza for like 44,000 Bitcoin or something for a couple pizzas. It felt like a joke, but at the same time, it was like, wow, there's like some brilliance here. My economics professor would be like, yeah, Bitcoin is like, I can guarantee you its future value is zero, like it's worth nothing. Then I dropped out of college to go start software companies in Silicon Valley. That was like 2013. And there were all these people that were like Bitcoin millionaires. I wish I had invested back when it was $1 or whatever. Unfortunately, like I kind of missed the boat. At the beginning of 2017, I realized that the whole crypto market was going to pop. In 2020, the dollar devalued by 50%, like overnight practically. It's basically just like a bathtub filled with liquidity. The Federal Reserve, they decided to siphon off about half the liquidity pool. This thing is a house of cards. It's collapsing, and we've got to build the next thing before it's all over. Bitcoin is the best hedge right now.
Welcome to Sat Chats, the Bitcoin podcast where we chat about sats. Sats are the smallest part of a Bitcoin, the same way pennies are the smallest part of a dollar. With Sat Chats, we're building the world's biggest Bitcoin welcome center to serve as your gateway to generational wealth. So if you're brand new to Bitcoin, we want to chat about sats with you. Head to satchats.com to grab your slot in the studio today. I'm your host, Stuart, Bitcoin Dad.
And I'm Anna Bevan, number 40 and chief of staff here at Sat Chats.
So today in the virtual studio, coming to us live from Austin, TX, number 116, Skye. And he is going to be telling us his Bitcoin story up to and including how he went even beyond that into the realm of decentralization and what it means for like a better, fairer future for mankind. So I'm really excited to get Skye's story today. Skye, why don't you introduce yourself to our Satillionaires and then let's just launch right into your story, man.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Stuart. Great. An honor to be on your podcast. Really like what you guys are doing here. I'm Skye, and yeah, I feel like my story is just spiritually woven with Bitcoin because of how I was raised and my experiences, leading up to college, and then studying economics in college. And then after that, just being involved with, I would say, the Bitcoin community, crypto community, and decentralization communities in Silicon Valley, in Switzerland, and here in Austin, where I am now, has been just been quite a journey, and I'm happy to share all about it. I think for me, it really started where, my parents were savers. My parents were the classic savers where it was, work hard and, live below your means, save capital. The problem with that is that they didn't realize that in the system we lived in, saving wasn't rewarded to the extent that it should be, right? It was like people were rewarded for taking on a lot of debt, take on a lot of debt, and then house values go up, right? And then it's like all these things happen, right? But then 2008 happens and it's an unmitigated disaster and so many people are losing everything. And at that time, I knew that, the government, the treasury, the Fed, I knew there were shenanigans going on. I think everybody kind of knew that. But me, like everybody else, it was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do about it. Like, what am I going to do? I'm just like one person here. And, it didn't seem like many people really understood the financial system. So anyway, back to I was in high school in 2009 when I first heard about Bitcoin. And I really heard about it very early on. My friend was like, oh, like Bitcoin, like some dude used it to buy pizza for like 44,000 Bitcoin or something for a couple pizzas. And we thought it was kind of a joke because it was like, it it felt like a joke, but at the same time, it was like, wow, there's like some brilliance here. But for the most part, people were kind of like making fun of it, right? And I remember researching it and going on Wikipedia, and it was like arcane computer science speak. I had no idea what was going on. I was like, what? And I remember trying to like understand it because I was like kind of interested. I even remember having the thought cross my mind, like, oh, this, like, it was worth like pennies. Now it's worth like dollars. It could be worth like, who's to say it couldn't be worth like millions of dollars or whatever, you know? And, and, but I didn't really think that much more of it. Um, I remember having a conversation in a class in high school, and it was like, yeah, it's basically like a digital gold. But the thing is that, and this was what got me back then, is that gold I saw as kind of worthless. Is like it's valuable, kind of. And it's value. Everything has value because somebody's willing to pay for it. So if something's worth whatever amount, that's what it's worth. That's what the market says. That's truth at this moment in time. So I was like, it's cool. It's like basically gold that you can send anywhere in the world, and that's great. But it wasn't enough because like I knew that the U.S. stock market had gone up like way more. So I was more focused on like stocks and that type of wealth generation than like Bitcoin taking stuff over. Anyway, fast forward, I go to college. I went to college at a small school in Switzerland, and it was definitely a perspective shift and a paradigm shift in a lot of ways. But the curriculum, like the economics curriculum, was still based on central bank stuff, right? Which is basically there's an interest rate, and what they say is the central bank sets the interest rate in order to help the economy achieve price stability and full employment. And it was like, okay, like I got it. And my economics professor would be like, yeah, Bitcoin is like, it's, I can guarantee you its future value is zero. Like it's worth nothing. And I was like, there's always a part of it was like, well, that's interesting because it's like clearly worth something because people are exchanging it. But that was how I was thinking about it. I was influenced a lot by that dogmatic economic programming or thinking or way of understanding things. Then I dropped out of college to go start software companies in Silicon Valley. And it was interesting because when I went there, the people, it was definitely more innovators and people that are like techie, right? And it was the first wave of Bitcoin millionaires. That was like 2013. And there were all these people that were like Bitcoin millionaires. And it was like, oh, like, cool. Like, I wish I had invested back when it was $1 or whatever. Unfortunately, like, I kind of missed the boat. And then there was the pullback from like 2015 or 2013 to like 2015. And it was kind of like, yeah, whatever. And then all of a sudden, like Ethereum and all these other cryptos started coming out. And I'm like, I mean, in some sense, they're newer. So are they better? And like, I didn't really know. And I was kind of just focused on working on software startups and investing the money I had in stocks. So I still was like, yeah, like I'm not totally sure. And I would ask the smartest people I know, like, like what do you think about Ethereum? What do you think about Bitcoin? What should I buy? Like, should we make a Bitcoin wallet? Is that some software that we should make? And then actually a friend of mine made a wallet. He was like, we were talking about what to build. And then he basically built an Ethereum wallet for all the ERC20 tokens, which is now the Trust wallet. My friend Victor. And I was like, and then that was when Bitcoin was like going up again. And I was like, at that point, at the beginning of 2017, I realized that the whole crypto market was going to pop. And it didn't matter what you bought. It was probably smart to buy like a weighted average basket of everything. And that was my plan, was to buy like some Bitcoin, some Ethereum, some Ripple, and like I think there was Monero and a few others that were like very small market caps. And then, but in 2017, I returned to finish my degree. And that's when I was like full on. I was like the central bank, because that's when I realized I was like, wait a minute. This is not the central banks helping the economy. This is not them setting interest rates for the betterment of everybody. This is them controlling a market, which is the credit market. and they've been controlling that market to push up asset prices, and the pushing up of asset prices is what made all these other people wealthy that used all this debt, and what basically, frankly, screwed over my family because they saved a bunch of money. So their money got devalued and everybody else's assets went up. And I'm like, I hate this system. This system literally took my family from being like a wealthy, like it literally, and my family works hard. My dad started painting houses when he was 15, and then he started his own company and he worked for every penny he earned. Why is it that there should be some central bank or commercial bank and it's like, well, we decide that we're going to give all this wealth to somebody else? And that's what we were talking about a little bit, before the show started, is like, when there's a present value calculation, right? So if you give somebody like a central bank control of the currency, they can reduce the interest rate and increase the present value of assets. And that transfers wealth from the poor to the rich. And the more money somebody has, the more money they get in that system. But it wouldn't be possible if everybody was using Bitcoin, right? So that's when my friend was like, hey, who wants to see Skye debate his professor or the economics professor about Bitcoin versus crypto? And I, basically said that. But at the time, everybody's like, well, what, what? But like, they're just going to make it, the governments are going to allow it. They're not going to allow it. And then how do you even exchange it and do all this stuff? And I remember being like, we're going to have decentralized exchanges. We're going to have this. And that was back before Uniswap was like live and before the automated market making algorithms were like doing their thing. Right. But, then after that 2017, 2018 peak, it kind of things fell back again. And it was like, okay, what's going on? And, I didn't, have much. I got, I had some Bitcoin, right? But then 2020 is when I think everything just changed, because it was like everybody had this view of the dollar as like, well, it's at least stable, right? It's like I can buy something today and tomorrow, and then all of a sudden 2020 happens and it's like instantaneous 50% siphoning of the liquidity pool. And that's, again, like that's the analogy that we were using earlier. And it's like, you could think of money as being, it's either in these assets like houses or whatever, or it's in something liquid, like dollars or Bitcoin, right? And it's basically just like a bathtub or a dish, like a basin filled with liquidity, right? And what happened in 2020 is the central bank decided to siphon off, right? The Federal Reserve, they decided to siphon off about half the liquidity pool, right? And use that to bail out all the, whatever, the government, all of it, just like in 2008. And that hurt people immensely. And that really, I think, woke up a lot of people. And me, it was like, wow, like this is all happening way faster than we thought. Like I didn't think that the dollar was going to get devalued by 50%, like overnight practically. That was insane. And then on top of it, it's like all these small businesses were being eviscerated. So that's when, I think I just really delved deeper into, okay, how can we fully decentralize the economy and rebuild this? It's kind of like, hey, there's a house of cards. And then people are debating. It's like, well, is it a conspiracy? Is it not? I'm like, I don't care. This thing is a house of cards. It's collapsing. And we've got to build the next thing before it's all over. Right.
Let me stop right there, Skye, to summarize for everyone who's been following along here, because it feels like we've gotten to the moment where you're about to go beyond Bitcoin here. Yeah. But and I'm interested to hear what that next thing is. But it sounds like you grew up with parents who were savers, mm-hmm. and it was really, I could identify with the moment when you talked about how they were not rewarded. Yeah. For being savers. People are, the system we have, people are rewarded for taking on debt. Your parents, they're setting aside a nest egg that is being siphoned off mm-hmm. by the government in favor of people who have assets instead of money. It's insane. And, it sounds like, you talked about how in 2008, your family was hurt by that financial crisis. Yeah. And again, in 2020, when they just printed, I think it was like 40% of the existing money supply was printed and put into circulation during the pandemic. That really did create this scenario where it used to be $7 for me.
40% was siphoned.
Right. And we'll have to hear about that in a second, because you have kind of a different way of understanding how cash is added to the money supply. But printed or siphoned, it was devalued
greatly.
Absolutely.
Point blank. And my $7 spicy chicken deluxe meal at Chick-fil-A became $9 and then $12.
I literally had Chick-fil-A last night, and I thought about you because I got the wrap and it was $15.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah. I was like, man, when did that happen?
It used to be $20 for a family of 4 to eat fast food. Now it's $17 for me to get a burger and fry, no drink at Five Guys.
Yeah.
I'm like, golly. And you know, we had someone on the show too, Skye. His name was Michel from Beirut, from Lebanon. And he talked about how their government printed or siphoned off so much over several decades that someone who saved up 6 million Lebanese units of money, whatever it is,
I don't know what it is,
to retire, like he knew like a granddad who, you know, saved up 6 million units of money and like, I'm going to retire, but the purchasing power of that 6 million was dropped to 600,000, and he couldn't retire. He saved up to retire and then could not retire because his government had devalued his money so badly. So I just wanted to kind of recap for everyone and help us get oriented around why you were driven into this area to find Bitcoin as an alternative to the devaluation or to the siphoning off. So now can explain to us, you know, because we've always talked for 118 episodes now about how the government prints the money.
Right.
And they basically like add it to the supply. So like if you had $100 during the pandemic, they would print 40 more, and now you have $140. But it kind of sounds like you're saying it's not like they literally put 40 cash dollars into the system. They do some funny business. Talk to us about what that is.
Yeah, well, I think it's all, I also wanted, as an aside, like, you know, you see all this devaluation happening like in Lebanon, in Iran, like this is in Zimbabwe, Venezuela. It's a story that happens a lot. So it was my hunt for the truth too that was leading me to that, because it was like, what's really going on here? And then it was like people weren't telling the truth. It was like the money is the problem. That's the thing. That's what's hurting people. But then the people that control the money and those interests are like, well, let's scapegoat this other thing or this other thing, right? So hunting for that truth is kind of, I think, what drove me a lot and a lot of Bitcoiners. But to go back to when talking about truth, we speak our reality into existence, right? So if you have something where, like, imagine the three of us, we all have a pot of gold, right? Between us. We have a pot of gold, right? But then I take that pot of gold and I say, you need to, like, I create the money, I create the value, and you need it from me, right? Because I create the money, right? I print the money. Printing implies creating, right? And it's different. Like in English, you make money, right? You make money. You can also say you earn, but you generally say like, I make money. In Spanish, you say ganar dinero, which means to win money, which implies a zero-sum game of competing, right? Creating versus winning, right? And when people say print money, they're implying, oh, like creating money, right? It's like, oh, the Fed or whatever central bank, they, or commercial banks, right? They print money, like they create money, but they don't. People create money. People create value. Like you can't just say, oh, I just created $40 quintillion. Like that the value is the building of the houses, the growing of the food, all the things that are actually creating value in an economy, right? What the Fed is doing and what other central banks do is not creating money. They're getting people to enter into contracts, right? And this is what Bretton Woods was. When the US and the Western financial establishment won World War II, they knew they were going to win in 1944 when they had the Bretton Woods Conference. They said, listen, we're going to get everybody tied to this debt mechanism, which is the US dollar, right? And there's going to be convertibility to gold, whatever, but basically people are going to be holding dollars. So what that means is in their pot of gold, or you can think of it like a bathtub holding liquidity. All these other countries and all these other people are now putting liquidity into that pool of liquidity, thinking they can get the same amount back, right? And then because so many people are doing that, because so many people put their little teacup of liquidity into the bigger bathtub, the US government could spend a lot. They could siphon off a little bit. And it's like, it could siphon off, you know, like, I mean, the nominal, let's say in today's terms, it could siphon off $1 trillion, right? And create $1 trillion of new credit. And it doesn't affect inflation that much. Maybe that's 2% inflation, 3% inflation, right? Because it's using that money and it's creating credit. So some of it is now going to be productive, right? Like they used $1 trillion to build $1 trillion of new homes and new value. But the truth is that ultimately a lot of that is unproductive. So there's a lot of new debt, but there's not really new assets or new value in the economy. So when people, the U.S. economy appeared pretty stable because it had all of these different countries around the world feeding into that global liquidity pool, that global bathtub. So it's spending all this money, and the inflation rate was not that bad. I mean, sure, it was high, like in the 70s, early 80s. You know, there were times, but it was like not catastrophic, right? Whereas other countries like Zimbabwe, like Venezuela, like Iran, they had a much smaller little liquidity pool, right? So they spend $1 billion, they're already running on empty. That's hyperinflation. People thought that the US was never going to run out of money, never print its way to hyperinflation, right? Because it felt like there was infinite money. But now what's happening is countries are saying, well, hey, we're not holding government debt. We're not holding US government debt. We're not using dollars. So all that liquidity is no longer in the pool. So now it's like, oh, well, we're going to print another $2 trillion or $3 trillion. Since 2020, it was $4.5 trillion printed, right? Which was siphoned. So when you siphon $4.5 trillion out of 20 trillion, okay, there's a certain amount of inflation. When there's only $10 trillion in real value left and you siphon $4.5 trillion, you just created a lot more inflation, right? You created a lot more devaluation. So when people no longer consent to having their liquidity devalued, then the central bank will have no ability to print money. People will say, oh, I thought the central bank could print money. Oh, that's right. It can't print money. It can just siphon money if people are allowing them to do that by holding dollars in checking accounts, in physical currency, or in dollar-denominated government bonds that are paying a coupon return in dollars. So when all the liquidity in the world is being held in gold and Bitcoin, nobody's going to be able to, the central bank will have no power to print money, and also no power to influence the credit markets, and no power to artificially inflate the value of assets. So there's definitely a reset coming.
So when we talk about siphoning and printing, the dollar isn't backed by anything anymore, like thoughts and prayers by the United States government. And so if we were just siphoning what existed, and maybe I'm just not understanding what you're saying, if you're siphoning what already existed in the bathtub away from the people who are accessing the bathtub, there's not any more in the bathtub. And so it would still hold its value based on what exists in the bathtub. What am I missing from what you're saying and what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, what you're missing is also another thing. Like sometimes you hear people say like, oh, Bitcoin's worth nothing, or oh, the dollar is worth nothing. Wrong. Everything is worth precisely what the market values it at that moment in time.
True, agreed.
So when you put what you're doing when you're putting liquidity into that bathtub, you're trading and you're saying, okay, instead of holding Bitcoin, I'm going to convert that into dollars. So I'm going to be putting it into the bathtub at a certain price, right? And then during that time when those dollars are in the bathtub, the siphoning that happens with the central bank is, or anytime, it's not just central banks, but any commercial bank, right? When they're creating credit, they're utilizing a little bit of that. They're spending a little bit of that liquidity, right? And then you're getting back what is left after a certain amount of time. So the siphoning is happening over time, if that makes sense. So it's, and in terms of whether or not things are backed by anything, the only thing that backs anything ever at any time is the market. If the market says I'm willing to pay this for this, that's what it's worth. There's a question of convertibility, right? Like the dollar used to be convertible to gold at $35 an ounce, right? And then they removed the peg. But in terms of something being backed by anything, the only thing that backs anything is the market.
So it sounds like after World War II, America said, look, world, put all of your various forms of wealth into our bathtub. And then we will take this giant pool of wealth and siphon off a percentage or 2 or 3 in order to, get money flowing out there a little bit easier. And then the productivity from that will end up paying everybody back and it'll be fine. We will basically create some inflation here, 1% or 2% or 3%, but we can tolerate devaluing everyone's savings in exchange for stimulating the economy by kind of taking this big old bathtub and, getting a 2-cup measuring cup out and using that to kind of water the farm, so to speak, and get things growing. But one thing I heard from you that was interesting is it only works so long as everyone wants to put their wealth into America's bathtub.
Yeah.
And, America, I guess they sell bonds that basically says, look, buy this thing from me and I'll make good on it later. And then they get the money that way to start doing stuff with it. But if you have a world that says, you know what, this isn't as cool as I thought it was going to be. I'm going to store my wealth in gold. I'm going to store my wealth in Bitcoin. Then the water in the bathtub slowly, people start to withdraw that water for themselves to put it into gold, into Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And you create a situation where far enough into the future, the government may no longer be the person that manages the money or creates the money or whatever. They would have to work for their gold or Bitcoin the same way we do.
Precisely. I mean, I think you nailed it on so many fronts, and it's important that you brought up, because like when everybody was paying into that system of the dollar, it did allow the U.S. to build a lot of weapons to win the Cold War, right? It did allow the U.S. to invest in its economy, right? And when you're investing, when you have that amount of capital and you're investing it wisely, like if you're devaluing at, like, let's say 3% per year, but then you're making investments that are generating 5% per year growth, you're golden, right? The problem is, what happens when that doesn't happen anymore? What happens when you start making bad investments? What happens when you're no longer building your economy, but you're building the economy of China? What happens when you're no longer building the economy, but you're just inflating the real estate market with a massive amount of debt without much new wealth? But what you hit on a very important topic, which is flow. You're like, it allowed there to be some flow. And I think that's the thing that, the fiat system and the dollar has gotten right. Now, it's not a flow that people consent to willingly or like knowingly, right? It's like the government's going to take some of your money and then they're going to spend it however they want. Now, that will create flow in the economy. The problem is it's not consensual, right? And I think that's one of the problems that Bitcoin is running into right now is like, okay, well, there's no incentive for people to spend or invest money when they're holding Bitcoin. And it's good to move away from dollars, but what do we do about that? So it's,
do you think that there's like, I guess the way that I see things is that we are in an accumulation phase of history where the Bitcoin is getting gobbled up by all who are aware enough to do so. Mm-hmm. And it isn't creating immediate hyper Bitcoinization as a result. Like, we're not in a phase of Bitcoin where it is a universally accepted medium of exchange. But personally, I believe, and I've had a number of OG Bitcoiners on the show who hold that after we get past this kind of hungry hippos phase, let's say we get enough people into Bitcoin, and all you gold bugs out there, shout out. I got to shout out the gold bug who took my quarter ounce Eagle coin in exchange for dollars that I was able to drive into Bitcoin. All right. Appreciate you, bruh.
Congrats.
But if you get enough people into gold and Bitcoin to where the fiat currency collapses around you anyways, then it is time to spend your Bitcoin, because that's the currency that's accepted. You know, like, do you think that there's a situation where there's several decades of accumulating Bitcoin, and then from there, there's a circular Bitcoin economy with enough flow and spending? Because the only thing you can buy your grocery with is sats, because the paper money was worthless 3 decades ago at that point.
Right. I think that, you know, you touched on a lot of different things. I think that, yeah, we are in an accumulation phase. It's like fiat melts, right? Like, people, I don't really see it as like, oh, Bitcoin is going up in value. I think it's more like the dollar and euro and all those other fiat currencies are collapsing in value. And it really, if you think about it in plain, simple terms, and just look at the charts, it's an exponential decay function with a horizontal asymptote of 0, which is just like any sort of pump and dump penny stock. It's an asset that has no value, that's going down to nothing. And the only reason somebody would buy it is because they don't understand that that's ultimately where it's headed. Right. So I think you're right about the accumulation phase of Bitcoin right now, for sure. I mean, Bitcoin is the best hedge right now. How long that takes, whether decades or not, I don't know. There's another factor, which is that the central banks also have the power to increase the interest rate sharply. Right. And if that happens, now all of a sudden liquidity is pulled back in to the dollar. Right. If the real interest rate is higher, you know, so there's still a lot of power that the existing system has. But ultimately, you know, like you mentioned earlier, right now, governments don't have to really earn. They're not competing in a free market to get their capital. They're just kind of siphoning, right? So as we move toward that Bitcoin, you know, the new world Bitcoin order, or however you want, you know, would want to say it, we're moving toward a world where there's different city states or principalities or countries that are all competing for access to that capital via consent only. And I think that's really what can contribute to, you know, the heaven on earth that we're working to build, is actually having a free market. That's the one main area where we haven't had a free market. And it's like these governments, they're just taking. What if they could only get capital by consent? Right. And I think that's ultimately where we're going now. That future economy, whether it's Bitcoin or another coin, should, in the interest of all humanity, have a reinvestment mechanism, and also probably a payout mechanism for universal basic income. Because that's the other thing, is that, like, what are we actually, like, with Bitcoin, there's a certain amount of electricity that's being valued, like the energy input. But if you look at what's really valuable right now, it's definitely energy, but also data. And I think people don't fully understand that with respect to the future of Bitcoin, because the future AI, the general AI that can literally build cities in a year that cost $100 billion and just like print them, right? Like actually print money, like actually print value. That AI is worth like everything. Like, how do you value the present value, like the present value of an AI 20 years out that has that wealth creation potential? It's so valuable. So the data to see that AI is commensurately valuable, right? And we're getting to this point as a civilization where the value of our data, rather than being held in centralized systems, right, like which Bitcoin is expressly against, right, like Amazon, Facebook, Google, the CIA, whatever, the Chinese Communist Party, all that data, it's growing in value so much. So as we move that data into a collective system that feeds an AI, now that AI can pay out. It can pay out a universal basic income to everybody that's enough to live on just by existing, just by having that data. So I think that's really the question is, okay, how are we going to fund the AI? Probably with Bitcoin, definitely with Bitcoin. And then where's the data going to come from? And then in that new economy, are we using Bitcoin? Are we using something else? Regardless, I think it's the value leaving obviously fiat currency, but being more embodied in like the actual value of the data and the energy, more so than just like something like somewhat abstract.
Okay. Whoa. So
Yeah.
When we started this episode, I thought that we might scry into the future with Skye.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've managed to achieve so far is to understand his origin story and why Bitcoin is a valuable piece of the solution to the problems that he and his family experience and that we're all experiencing.
Yeah.
But what I heard just now, and then I'm going to attempt to recap here in a moment, feels like it is worth an entire additional episode. And we do know that there is so much to Bitcoin and to the future of this world in a decentralized, way forward that we will never fit it all into a single chat about sats, right? Sats are the smallest part of a Bitcoin. We're just chatting about sats over here.
This was just the smallest part of Skye's story.
Exactly. This was the Satoshi of Skye's story right here. Yeah. So we do ask each of our guests, Skye, if they'd be willing to come back on in 9 months to give us an update on their Bitcoin baby. Would you be willing to come back on in 9 months?
Sure. Absolutely. I think that a lot will change in the next 9 months, but I'm more than happy to come back.
So real quick, before I recap, give me like 30 seconds on what you think will change between now and when you come back on the show.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have the first nodes of the Nava network operational. So I have the first Web 5 team in the world here in Austin. I currently live with them, and they build fully decentralized hardware, software, and infrastructure for a whole new internet that doesn't involve any centralized intermediaries or censoring third parties. And we're going to be putting in nodes for a new heart-centered AI that's fully sovereign, fully in our control, and fully explainable, again, where there's no potential for censorship. And that's going to be operational in various luxury properties around Austin and ideally around the world. And we're going to have a fund that's supporting the growth of this new community, this new heart-centered community. And that fund is going to be deploying hundreds of millions to billions of dollars in capital. And everything's going to be running on Bitcoin, the network. And there's going to be people, there's going to be think tanks and some of the biggest innovators in the world gathering here in Austin and in other places, focused on health and focused on healing the global economy. And we're going to be a lot closer to the answers on how we can create the regenerative circular flow in the economy, how we can structure the AI, and how we can transition a lot of Bitcoin's existing computing power into high performance computing power for the new global decentralized AI.
Squadoosh. Okay.
That was a very direct answer to the what's going to happen in the next 9 months.
That was a whopper of a prediction right there. So let's recap the conversation here with Skye today. He grew up with parents who were savers. they were not rewarded, which is tragic, quite frankly. To do the right thing, to set aside for the future, but be inside a system that is that is basically siphoning off your hard-earned time and energy without your consent. You have absolutely no power to stop your local governing body from siphoning off some of the community's wealth, all in the name of maybe ultimately helping out that community. But over the decades, just getting more and more and more upside down until the 2008 financial crisis, the 2020 pandemic. Skye's family was not helped out by those two events, but asset holders were. And there was like this kind of wild relationship that you've described to us here today, Skye, where if you tinker with the interest rates, you can make the value of your assets go up and the purchasing power of your money go down. But if you tinker with the interest rates the other way, you can make the value of the assets go down and the purchasing power of your money go up. And they're just kind of, they're like Tokyo drifting on this gas brake pedal, and we're all just sloshing around in the back in a tub of tofu, initial D style. There's nothing we can do about it. So you studied economics at university there in Switzerland, and even went toe-to-toe in a slugfest with your professor, and stood up for Bitcoin and what it represents, which is a form of money that these governments cannot control. And really, like, one of the larger themes for your episode today was the power of the free market and the ability for the market to determine what the value of something is. And guess what? By and large, we have not been operating in a free market. We just really have not. And it might be able to operate in pockets here and there, individual transactions between neighbors. But like the global system is not a free market, because after World War II, the United States said, look, guys, first of all, we did it. We won. Second of all, just drive all of your wealth into our system and we'll kind of circulate it back out and safeguard it and win various Cold Wars and make it all happen. And I think overall, you could argue that that's been beneficial for the American people as a whole, but it's been very detrimental to individual Americans who are attempting to earn money and save and get out ahead. So it's kind of just a very strange, nuanced, difficult to understand dynamic system there. But you got folks like Skye who are envisioning a decentralized free market of the future where artificial intelligence 3D prints entire cities, creating wealth overnight and generating enough value for everyone to kind of maybe get a little piece for themselves through a universal basic income. And he's got a Web 5 scenario happening, which I'm all about. Let's go. Censorship-resistant free internet, the same way we want a censorship-resistant free market. And my guy's got I don't know if it's a heart-centered AI because it's going to focus on healing the physical heart in my body, or if it's a heart-centered AI because it's like not going to be as robotic. I have no idea. But we're going to find out in 9 months when my boy Skye has it all fully operational.
Stay tuned.
And I would like to go ahead and reserve in advance, and I am calling dibs, and you have to respect the dibs here. This is a binding contract, okay?
Obviously.
I'm calling dibs on some juicy property inside your 3D printed AI city of the future.
Okay.
Let me juice on that a little bit, okay? I'm looking for kind of like a very modern, sleek. I kind of need you to like give me an AI fueled 3D printed Lothlorien, okay? Where it's like it's like I need like a cybernetic version of the Lord of the Rings elves in a forested area of this city of the future, okay? Can you make that happen for me?
Already done.
Yeah! Yes. All right, Skye. We're going to flip it over here to Anna Bevan for our next segment. And then we're going to make you an offer in exchange for all the value that you've brought to Sat Chats today.
All right. So we are here at our hummus break, which is just before the offer with Ithaca Hummus, our founding sponsor. This is the original classic.
So we did have classic.
It was buried pretty deep in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry, Jorm. So we have classic hummus here today. This was actually not the first flavor that Ithaca made. It was the fourth flavor.
Yeah.
And so we are going to act as your taste buds today.
I'm gonna get a fat glob here.
A fat glob. I have to have a half cracker because it's a little more ladylike.
I like it.
Okay, ready? Go.
Cheers.
Skye, have you ever had Ithaca hummus?
I am not sure, but I love hummus. So props to Ithaca for sponsoring Sats Chats. And yeah, I look forward to having some more for sure. Looks amazing. I can tell.
All right. So, Abe, you want to make him his offer here?
All right. So we have come to the offer part of today. We will offer you $50 in fiat or the equivalent in Bitcoin, which comes to 44,550 sats.
Our gift to you, man. Thank you for your value. As a Bitcoiner, we want to exchange some value back with you.
Value for value.
That sounds beautiful. Yeah, let's get the wallets hooked up. I will gladly accept the Bitcoin.
Yes,
Excellent.
sir.
Yep.
Let's go. You bring our scoreboard, Skye, to 109 guests who have stacked the sats, along with 9 who need just a little bit more time.
Just a tiny bit.
And our very first one, number 9, Paul, who took the cash, he's coming back soon. He must be due soon for his 9-month update. So we're going to be working on him. And I'm going to say, do you think that the cash you took 9 months ago is going to get you into Skye's AI-powered city of the future? It's not. Get your centralized government token out of my face, okay? That bathtub water that it came out of is dirty. It's gross. Nobody's emptied the bathtub. It looks like Encino Man when they get done cleaning Brendan Fraser in there. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Nasty bathtub. Skye, do you want to send our Satillionaires any old where online to interact with you or check out what you're doing?
Yeah, you can check us out at navanetwork.com. That's NAVA network.com. And Nava Network on Instagram as well.
Okay. So we'll put that in our show notes for everybody.
Right.
All right, Satillionaires, if you enjoyed our chat about Sats today, subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on notifications while you're at it. Hit that bell icon. Our goal is to put 10,000 subscribers underneath our Christmas tree, okay? December the 25. And to thank you for helping us get there, we'll be selecting one lucky subscriber at random to win 2 million sats, okay? Not 44,550 like my boy number 116 over here. 2 million. So join us every weekday at 11 a.m. for more. Monday through Friday, we premiere episodes just like this one, and you can jump in the chat and hang out with us and other Satillionaires. Friday, it's TikTok Next Block, the live game show where you play for 1 million sats.
It's the greatest game show to ever see the internet.
Of all time.
All time.
All time. It's the GOAT. And it's 1 million Satoshis on the line each week, which we will go down in history for like, they're like, dude, there used to be a game show where people could win $1 trillion each week. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like people are going to be shocked when they look back, but we'll still be playing.
History will remember us.
We'll still be giving away 1 million sats. We'll still be rolling. So if you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can sign up at satchats.com. If you want to play TikTok Next Block, you can go to satchats.com/TikTok Next Block. Now, if you don't want to stand in line to be a player, you can skip the line. How do you skip the line?
You play in the chat.
You play in the chat. Okay? There's a game going on in the screen. There's a game going on in the chat. It's the funnest hour on Fridays for you when, like Skye, your AI is already doing everything for you anyway. So you're just checking your email. You're making sure your calendar for the next week is looking good. Okay? Tune in from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern. Play along in the chat. Put your answer into the chat. And if you get it right first, you get a point. The high score gets to skip the line and come play the game the following week. Okay. Your support helps us grow the show and Bitcoin adoption. So if you've already subscribed, thank you. You can also donate your sats to this show on chain or in the Lightning Network, and we'll roll those sats into our next cash versus sats segment to bring a new Bitcoiner on board. You'll find our donation addresses in the show notes along with Skye's info. For all sponsorship inquiries for either Sat Chats or TikTok Next Block, you can email us, okay? show@satchats.com. And Anna Bevan will totally look into the inbox and let me know when something important has arrived. And we'll work on it.
Right there.
Yeah, we'll work on it together as a team. All right. So one final note, Sat Chats is for educational purposes only and should not be construed as financial advice. Also, our guests' views are their own. See you on the next one. Keep stacking them sats.